The boss squad, I'm gonna get mine. I'll do the time. If you can't do the time, don't tell me how you're all down. When you smile in my face, but you play me like a clown, it's your fool, bitch. So just step back. I'm a mad dad when I call down straight. I thought you were my piece, but you play me out. Now I'm mad as hell, and I won't let down. Who you wanna roll with? Who you wanna roll with? Let's go. Who you wanna roll with? Who you wanna roll with?
Good evening, Paco.
Back on the scene, it's not to get mean, I'm a lean revolution machine. For what people stay, they sway. One day is good as any day. You're slightly this, let's resist. Raise your fist and walk like this. Promises over the top. Don't cross the line, but you know it's fun. Who you wanna roll with? Who you wanna roll with?
I can't see me yet. Oh, I am. Oh, okay. You can. Hi, Kenny.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing great this week.
Good.
These last 10 days have been wonderful.
Haven't they?
Yes.
Yes, I totally agree. So, did you meet Jim? That's Jim down there.
I got to meet. Yep.
The beard. Lefty is back there in town in Bayonne.
Lefty I met.
Okay.
Jim I'm meeting. So how are things?
Jim, you're muted.
What's that?
No, Jim, you're muted.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you got a little echo. Oh,
I got an echo. I got to go out and go back in. Hold on. I'll be right back.
I got an echo.
I'm gonna have an echo while the song is on.
So it was 9,000 degrees up here in the northeast metropolitan area today. How is it down the shore?
Hold on.
Are you beachy
Good evening.
people?
Yeah. We can't. I can never allow myself to complain about the weather here because
No, you can't.
it's something that sort of San Diego, La Jolla has. We've cornered the market on good weather. So
Yep, that's the weather in the country.
Yeah, rub it in.
And I lived in New York for about 4 years, upstate New York. So
Yeah, but you lived in
know
Rochester. That's like
not quite Rochester. It was Utica.
Oh, Utica.
I call it the armpit of New York.
Okay.
I think New Jersey's the other armpit.
I think we're the anus.
I will not be lured into disrespecting my hosts. Fine New Jersey people.
So welcome to the Ignorance is No Excuse podcast. Our special guest tonight is Ken Sobel. Ken is an international cannabis consultant, studied law at California Western School of Law and Review, chairman of the Student Bar Association, Advocacy Honors Board, ABA Client Counseling Competition, author U.S. Virgin Islands, Medical Cannabis Patient Care Act, Ryan's Law, which I want to get to, and has been a practicing lawyer in both California and Arizona since 1980, and a VP of Genesis International Cannabis Solutions. Wow, what a resume.
Wow, who are we really talking about here?
Is this you?
Me?
Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty light.
You have the wrong guy?
I did good, didn't I?
You did great, Sue.
Yeah,
How much do I owe you?
Amazing. What is Ryan's Law? Can you explain Ryan's Law? That's very interesting.
Ryan's Law is named after Ryan Battelle. Ryan is was the son, the adult son of a very dear friend of mine in San Diego, who we had gotten very close with over the years. And I didn't know really the rest of his family. They were all grown up. But Ryan Battelle was a special needs teacher up in the state of Washington. And at age around 40, he was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And we had a meeting set up with Jim the morning that he got the news. And he told us as soon as we arrived, we meaning myself and the famous cannabis nurse, Heather, my better 2/3. And so we cried for, a good long while. And he had told us that the hospital that he was in, where we refused to allow Ryan access to medical cannabis, and instead he was on heavy doses of different opiates that kept him in basically a semi-comatose condition, so that he couldn't spend any quality time the few short weeks that he had remaining in his life to be with his family and his young son, his wife, and obviously his dad and mom. And so we created, a product for him to use, got it to the hospital. They refused to allow him to use it. And then it took a couple of weeks to find a hospital that would allow him to use it. As soon as he received that cannabis extract, sublingual basically, within a matter of hours, he was able to be happy and pain-free and be with his family and get restful sleep the last very few weeks of his life. And then he passed away. So we created Ryan's Law in California. I wrote the bill with my friend Jim Bartell. We got a local state senator here. California has a bicameral system. We have a assembly that consists of 80 members and a Senate that consists of 40 members. So we crafted the bill for Ryan's Law, which allows any person who's in hospice or has a terminal illness, meaning in California 1 year or less to live, a bill that requires all hospitals and related types of inpatient care facilities to allow those patients to use cannabis. And so it was a 3-year process. At one point, we had the unanimous vote of all 40 senators and all 80 assemblymen, all Republicans, Democrats, and independents, everybody. It went to the governor's office, and then we got backdoored, I call it. I don't want conjure up anything nasty or sexual, but basically the hospital association came in. They had the key to that secret door at the governor's office, and they convinced him to veto it because they're afraid of losing their Medicare and other types of reimbursements. The next time around after COVID, we were successful again in getting the unanimous support of the legislature. And this time the governor signed it after I got a letter from Medicare. When I got a letter from them saying that they had no interest in trying to enforce it or penalize any hospital that didn't allow them to follow Ryan's Law. So the governor signed it, went into effect January 1 of 2022. It's been the law of California now for 2 years, and it's now been introduced in multiple other states. Maybe someday it'll also be introduced in New Jersey. We'll be having hearings probably early next year in the state of Hawaii, as the chairman of their health committee in the Hawaii Senate has agreed to sponsor the bill. So that's basically Ryan's Law. I kind of gave you the whole, soup to nuts, A to Z. But it kind of came full circle for me because I first got involved in cannabis when my mother-in-law came home for me to care for her in the last few months of her life from basically untreatable cancer, basically terminal illness. And as soon as somebody elbowed me and said, Ken, you've got to give her medical cannabis because it'll help her. And as soon as we did, it did. And she not only was able to move around comfortably, but we were able to play bridge together. She just felt good. It just relieved all those symptoms and gave her an appetite. And so I found that out in my very first experience with medical cannabis back in the year almost like 2000. And we had now come full circle to where we were with Ryan's Law. And we were successful in passing it. It's one of the proudest moments of my life when we got that bill signed and approved by the governor.
So how cool is that, right? I could see that
Yeah.
happening here.
Yeah, and then there's kind of a broader dimension to it now, because my passion is to integrate. Well, I always tell people, look, all cannabis is medical cannabis, whether or not, and we have now an adult program and we have a medical program. So I tell them that all cannabis is medical cannabis, and everyone who uses cannabis uses it for a medical reason, whether they know it or not. And so the fact that kind of Ryan's Law kind of helps bring us into and forces allopathic medicine to accept cannabis is kind of a much, bigger and larger step that I think Ryan's Law provides.
A question on Instagram is, what hospital was that?
I don't recall. The one up in Washington. Okay. Don't recall. It's been too many years, and his life ended within a matter of weeks from the diagnosis. And I wasn't able to visit up there because we were in California. Jim's office was also here in San Diego, and that's how we got to know them. But he also was traveling up there to be with his son those last few weeks. So I can't remember what hospital.
Was he in the Seattle area?
Yeah, it was definitely in the Seattle area.
Okay.
How old was Ryan?
He was 40. And was apparently a beloved special needs teacher up there, and those people have my heart. I mean, they're gladiators.
That somehow someone's age. I mean, I can't imagine. Not enough of the backstory, but that's really sad, but is a really powerful message.
Yeah.
And
so,
it's one that we are grappling with here in New Jersey. Some grappling, some just turning their heads. They don't really want to deal with it. But in the end of life situation in New Jersey now, we have end of right to life. The end.
Right to
You have the right to the end of your own
Right to
life
die,
in New Jersey.
yeah, right to try.
Yeah, and so recognizing that, the late great Jeff Hoax did get a question to our governor about. He applied it to lack of home grow, which keeps people getting it, but lack of something is lack of something, no matter what the cause. And to live in a state like New Jersey, where you have the right to be institutionalized and end your own life, but you don't have the right to be in that same institution and have cannabis.
Yeah.
How wrong is that? Wow, that was well put. I'm gonna have to look. I'm gonna have to see this on the replay.
Yeah, there you go, man.
I
love it.
I'm gonna quote myself. Yeah, that
Well,
came out.
and you should, and you should. I mean, legitimately, that was a great point you made. I've just been astonished at how slowly, these are scientific facts that I proved over and over again, a decade ago. And we're still at that point where I'll attend these local cities that are deciding whether or not to allow a cannabis dispensary or other types of facilities. And you'll get the same old crowd up there. Oh my God, not my kids, And it's like, are you able to just Google, the human endocannabinoid system? Can you take 20 minutes to read that? I mean, come on, I've just been astonished at the pure ignorance that's out there, and especially within the medical community,
And with the endocannabinoid system, I try to advise people know just the basics of it, just the basics, because you will almost always be the smartest person in the room when you bring it up.
You have to talk to your kids. And, I was even thinking a while back, I had this, I don't know, I was probably dropping some, pretty good mushrooms at the time. But I thought, basically, it should be like a first aid kit in your house. You know what I mean? At this point.
Yeah.
Because, if you stub a toe or you injure yourself in some fashion, I mean, the first thing we do is we'll use topicals. I banged my toe into a wall, and rather than let it hurt for another 5 minutes, I put a topical on it. In a minute or so, it's just fine. Yeah. And people need to understand that this is not only safe medicine, but it's effective for 99% of what ails you.
And those topicals can be really surprising for people who haven't tried one. Now that it's not a great fear. What's going to happen, and will it be in my system? Will I get drug tested? Will it show up? None of that. But the can I get some reaction is more often than not when somebody hasn't tried anybody's version. And I just my brother just makes a nice balm, coconut oil base. With the magic butter machine. He runs it 24 hours instead of Frito because it gets it or whatever. But, it's so strange that it is so good from different directions for you that I make cookies, but sometimes I don't want to eat a cookie. I just, I want to brush my teeth. So basically, if it's in the refrigerator, I scrape it until I get a good little spoonful of it. And if it's more in a regular heated room, I can just take a fingerful. And then it really is pot luck because I'm not sure of the amount, but it's always the right amount. I mean, no matter which one it is, just right for that. So, the diversity of it, it's almost like it's so effective that there's always a constant undercurrent of, you think it's good for everything. Not
it is.
It doesn't help my balance. I know that.
Yeah.
I only know that from being a carpenter. I've explained. My body's more afraid of falling. Maybe I don't know. Just
and you're not having to worry about balance when you're sitting on your couch.
Yeah, and that's true too. And just the diversity is almost. And then you find out it's good for yet something else, and it's almost like, here we go. I can't help it if it's good for all that stuff. It's just the idea that it's the most amazing plant ever and the hardest one to deal with legally somehow because it makes you feel good. Holy crap. All the other nature's medicines, many of them don't make you feel good. And some, you got to get over a hump. And quite frankly, putting a needle in one's arm as opposed to taking a fingerful of something, I find that more objectionable. But
and the key is that you've got to start low and go slow, and that's probably the best medical advice you can get with cannabis, as far as
find out where your level is. But I'm just getting back to it's still echoing in my head what you were saying about Ryan and Ryan's law. Some of that's pretty familiar because you hear a lot of people's stories and it's too little too late sometimes. Sometimes there's a really good story where it worked out, at least for a while. But, the preponderance is probably somebody has to step up like you did and the people that you did this with. And when we have to deal with this still in New Jersey, Ryan's law, a lot of people have heard of it, even if they don't. Oh, I've heard of that, because a whole 3,000 miles away or whatever it is, it's still very much, and you don't have to really follow it closely to have heard of some of this because it affects everybody right now. Nursing homes and age restricted communities are the most interested, more than anybody. You'll get a rapt audience there when they start finding out all you have to do is rub it in, and then you can also eat it or have and the various ways that aren't smoking.
No, I mean we obviously have restrictions that don't allow it to be smoked, but I always recommend sublingual because it gets it gets to the brain a lot quicker and without as much complications as pure edibles. The sublingual method will get in your bloodstream, will get into the the brain, the part that's going to help mostly with your pain symptoms.
That's all I do. That's the only way I use it because I don't smoke anymore. I don't smoke anything.
And that's good. I mean,
Yeah.
But if I was recommending to somebody and it was a choice between, like, I've noticed because I work closely with PTSD patients, and I've noticed over time that they do better when they're able to inhale it, at least. Not, they don't often have a sublingual available, but by inhaling it, it acts more quickly and they get an immediate result and it calms them down. And so I recommend that for folks. And I'll say, look, even if you're okay with smoking it and you have PTSD, that's probably a good way to take it. And if you don't, can you vape it? But it's the immediate onset that you kind of need. And with edibles, of course, we know it takes, 20, 30, 40 minutes sometimes to get the effects of it. But I did put on the case, the Scopes monkey case. I don't know if, Jim, you're familiar with that or left.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So that was, and I did put that on in Arizona, where the Arizona Department of Health Services had refused to add post-traumatic stress disorder to their very limited qualifying conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went in and challenged that and produced a 122-page petition citing all kinds of medical authority, and they still denied it. And then we took them to a trial. So I did the first, I believe it's the first and only trial that we've ever really had where I was pushing for adding this new condition and was getting resistance from the Department of Health Services. And we actually had a 4.5-day evidentiary trial. And by God, we proved to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty that cannabis is safe and effective for post-traumatic stress disorder. And by that time, Nevada had already taken my petition and they added PTSD in Nevada. And then once we got our ruling and won, then PTSD was essentially added for all of the new states that were coming up with their own qualifying conditions. But
What year was this that all happened?
2014.
So yeah, we got
took 2 years. It took 2 years to get there.
We got PTSD added in 2016. It was probably, we were already trying to put it in motion. It's probably by the end of 2014. Somewhere. And I got to tell you, I'm hearing this, I'm thinking that whole list that you had, man, we could have used that. That's why Lefty gathers all states that want to, that have medical cannabis law together on July 10th, Oil Day. He's co-opted it for patients, the Patients Awareness Day. But, knowing something like that, that had to take a lot of work. I mean, the study, the studies part, but, we have a bicameral state government. I believe it's very similar, 80 senators and 40 senators and 80 assembly representatives. How do we sue when that happens? I mean, you sued, the suit was the department?
Yeah, so at the time, because of the way we structured Arizona's law, at the time it was the Arizona Medical Marijuana Act, and it passed in the November 2010 election. And it just so happened that year that my stepmom passed away the last of October of 2010, and my dad passed away on my birthday, December 4th, 2010. And right in between there, we had that November election, and the Arizona Medical Marijuana Act passed by less than 0.5%, passed by 5,000 votes statewide.
I didn't know that.
And was opposed by anybody who had any power, particularly on the Republican side. They wanted to end that before it even got started. So I spent the first, from November when it passed, December it's certified. I spent the next 2 years litigating in Arizona to get to keep the legislature from trying to repeal it. Fortunately, the president of the Senate at the time was a fraternity brother of mine. He didn't like anything about marijuana, but we were friends at least. So we were able to keep the legislature from rolling it back, but we had to litigate for 2 years with the state to implement the program. The public governor says, well, we're just not going to do it. And so we had to sue. So, but, having said that, Arizona was like the 12th or 12th state to add, a medical cannabis program.
You know, when I was living in New York, I think it was 2014. I have 10 million qualifying conditions that nobody qualifies.
Yeah.
Um, and the what you know what my part of my little activism role up there was, I found a doc, in the city, and he wrote me for a card for PTSD, because if nothing else, I have hepatitis C. I've been run over by a car twice. I've got bilateral knee replacements. I've got all this stuff, but nothing fell under a qualifying condition other than PTSD. Well, I lived through 9/11, so there we go.
You're right.
So I was able to do it that way. And my only reason for doing it at the time was so that I could take patients that were, hesitant they're a little scared to go to see a doc and say, well, is this for real? Is this legit?
Right.
So that was what I did, and
Yeah.
when I moved back here to Jersey, I'm still not a qualifying condition, but I still have PTSD, but I don't have a card here, so I don't care. Um, but it's pretty interesting. And down in the South Carolinas, North and South Carolina, they
Right.
have a variation of Bryan's Law.
Hmm.
They have very strict enforcement on any kind of medical or well, I don't think they don't have recreational. They have medical, and they're very limited in what they qualify. But they do have a variation in Bryan's Law, but it just says that family members can bring in medications. It doesn't say what.
Well, at least
I'm
it's
sure it
right.
says what somewhere, but it
Yeah.
doesn't mean cannabis.
So California was kind of unique
Mhm.
of all the states because they have, for the qualifying conditions, as you know, they have subsection A, which is you have this particular medical condition and therefore you can qualify for a card. Or B, you have certain symptoms of medical conditions and therefore
Mhm.
you qualify the card. And California, when we added Prop 215 in 1996, it had a subsection C that was any doctor who believes that his or her patient would benefit from
Benefit. Yeah.
cannabis can also be approved.
Yeah.
So we went from 0 to 180 conditions in no time. And at one time had over 1 million patients. But that was the beauty at the time of the program, was that it's critical to allow a patient to use the medicine for the specific condition he or she has, because that's how you track and study and find on a clinical basis how well it works. But Arizona was fighting us. They said, well, they could just qualify under pain because everybody has pain. And I said, well, that's your problem, is that we don't want these patients to qualify for pain because their chief symptom is PTSD.
Right.
And we can't properly evaluate and treat them over time without knowing that that patient is using it for that condition and then track how they're doing. So we all got off track with when the adult program came in, but I have no objections at all to that, because I use the adult program for patients. I call them all patients who are 21 and older. And that's just the easiest way to get them the medicine. And the easiest way is the best way. And then we, as practitioners and advocates, it's up to us to educate public that this is how it will help you, and this is the reason why you should use it. So anybody who's 40 years of age or above will have one or more conditions that benefit from cannabis use. And as I tell my retailers, because part of my business is I help people get into the business, regardless whether it's cultivation, manufacture, distribution, or retail. And I say, the biggest thing you can do is do a medically focused dispensary, even though it's adult use, because those patients are 40 years and above. We know they need cannabis for one reason or another. And they also happen to have the highest discretionary income. And since, other than New Jersey, which, by the way, you all did great by having your state workers' compensation program agree that cannabis had to be reimbursed. And I don't know, you might still be the only state that allows that. At least it's a step forward,
Yeah,
I mean,
somebody,
all health insurance should cover cannabis, but at least you guys have done it with the state workers' comp program.
well, so, lesbian or sued, wasn't somebody took that to court? I think is how that happened.
Yeah.
Rather
A few
than
years ago.
advocates getting together, it
Yeah.
was just simply,
Yeah, it was
you know,
somebody.
the court then is, you know, but you know, it's, imagine that a doctor and a patient having domain over that patient's health as to whether or not
Right.
cannabis is suitable and what
Yeah.
for. It blows my mind that that's at the end of a long trail. That's where
Yeah.
they end up, where that obviously should be the beginning. Let's start there, and then maybe the person's doctor doesn't know enough, and you have to go to somebody that does or whatever. But basically,
Well, see, the doctors got terrified because you may or may not know this. I don't know, and if it's interesting to you. So basically, when California became the first state to pass a Prop 215 that allowed for medical use of cannabis, the day after that happened, under the Clinton administration, they had the drug czar at the time declare that any physician who recommends cannabis will lose their DEA privileges. That was the first thing out of the box. We were litigating that for 4 years before we finally got the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals to say, no, you know, doctors can recommend it. You can't threaten them. You can't take away their DEA privileges. Stop it. And they tried to take it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court didn't want to hear it. But we had to fight that for 4 years. And so that convinced every doctor who was a doctor that they need to avoid anything having to do with recommending cannabis because they're going to lose their DEA license. And
Yeah, but you know what? Not
to
for
this
nothing.
day, I went over and passed the bill in VI, Virgin Islands, and every goddamn doctor there was, oh, I'm terrified of it. This is 20 years later. I'm terrified of it. I'm going to lose my DEA privileges. And that's still, I think, almost embedded in their minds. And so doctors haven't been particularly helpful to us, right?
No, not particularly. You know,
There are exceptions, but, you know, most of them, you know, it's like, hey, I've been told that you're going to lose your DEA privileges, and that still continues to haunt them.
So let me just tell you this though, because this is pretty funny. Because you know, my husband's a surgeon, right? So when Jersey, we were living in New York, but he was still working in Jersey. He was on ABC Channel 7, and he was sitting on a stretcher in Hackensack's ER, saying it's about time, you know, and they put him on TV, and nobody bothered him. And you know, they just went along their business up here, and that's what's very strange about this state. There are certain areas that just do what they want, and then there's areas like where Lefty and Jim live where it's not that easy, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I always say to them, you know, what, no matter what happens, and I think Heather and I always say this too, no matter what, it doesn't affect me personally, you know. But you know, there is a difference in the temperament. And then I saw a lot of docs in Bergen County, they jumped right on the bandwagon as soon as they could, you know, they were like, you know, going to be legitimate. They gave up their practice as far as, you know, in primary care. It was mostly primary care physicians doing it. So, you know, but they went right into that business, and that's it.
Yeah.
Made a killing, you know?
Yeah.
So
I think under Schedule 3, we're going to see doctors actually dispensing cannabis from their medical office. There's no reason they can't.
Yeah, 9 years from now.
I mean, we'll see. We'll be you know, trying to figure these things out as we go. But you know, I mean, I would say to any doctor, look, the best thing you can do for your patient is to provide him or her with, you know, a natural product that you know, you don't get the compensation that you're going to get from the drug companies unless and until they get to the point where they developed the drugs that they want to. I mean, that could be years down the road, but because it's safe from your malpractice standpoint, it's the safest thing you can do for somebody. Probably safer than aspirin. I mean, there were more deaths caused the last year due to overdose of aspirin then there were 0 deaths caused by cannabis. So
Yeah, 'cause
cannabis remains at 0.
their bellies bleed out.
Every year it's 0. And then aspirin, you get 30, 40 deaths, 50 deaths a year.
Tylenol overdoses. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Question from Instagram: why weren't the medical patients retained in the medical program?
Well, because it's just easier. If you're 21 or older, it's just easier. And I've always said that customers and patients, we all know that the supply chain is the same and the regulations and standards for safety are the same, whether it's listed as an adult product or a medical. And in California, that's all combined. So there's literally no difference. But it's just easier for a patient who's 21 or older to simply go to a dispensary or receive a delivery from a dispensary just using their age and their California driver's license.
Right.
Now, there are some advantages still, but you have to obtain a state card. So there's 2 different kinds of medical cards in California, for example. There's a letter from a physician that costs about $40 a year, and that letter will get you access to any medical cannabis product, assuming you're under 21 and you need to have that. Or there's a card you can obtain for about $150. That's a state-issued card that the counties manage the program. And if you have that, you can save 8.5% on sales tax. So if you're a patient and you want to save some sales tax, you get the card if you're more or less a heavy user of cannabis. So it's just easy enough as an adult patient to get it already, even though you're not getting a discount for sales tax. And people will kind of gravitate toward the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. And that's why I advocate for all my dispensary clients is, my God's sakes, develop. I'm putting a dispensary. We just got Hollywood High Grade up in Los Angeles. And so I've convinced them, we've got the architect, we're designing basically sort of a tripartite dispensary floor, that one part will be for the OGs, the old guys, so to speak, like all of us, I suppose, except for Sue. She looks fresh and young.
I could be old girl.
The other 2 guys are pretty old like me, but sort of an OG area for those adult users. And then we're going to do a medical area for more medical oriented. And then we're going to do one for women, for feminine needs, because women make up about 85% of the decisions, medical and health decisions that are made in America. 85% are made by women. So that's going to be the sort of tripartite. But we're going to be reaching out and trying to establish relationships with patients who know that cannabis helps their medical condition. And for that, we'll have cannabis nurses in the dispensary to help recommend those products to those patients.
Ken, before we continue, do you have a cell phone sitting by your computer or on a wire there?
Yeah, there's static coming in from somebody.
I believe that you're getting texts, and I believe it's because.
Oh, is that right? Oh, sorry.
It's near the computer or it's on a wire.
It was on a wire. It's now off the wire.
See, I'm psychic. I know these things.
I thought it was mine. I was playing with my wire.
I'm ashamed.
No, I'm just a good sound guy.
I'm an OG, so I don't know these things of a technical nature.
I noticed it wasn't Jim or Sue before because they were muted.
Yeah, it's in a drawer and it's off the wire.
Sorry.
If I need to, I'll sit on it if I have to.
You talked about scheduling before. How do you feel about the rescheduling or descheduling?
I'm a passionate advocate for descheduling, and I've been working on it for 20 years. But, all in all, descheduling would be better, but rescheduling is better as well. So for the safety and protection of our patients, given the current criminalized state that we still have, then we're all better off to Schedule 3, I believe, than not having a change. So in 2016, when we last lost our effort to reschedule, they did it on 2 grounds. One was because it still violated the international treaty from 1960, and number two, because it still was considered to have no medical value.
Right.
So in 2020, the international standard changed when the whole world voted to reduce cannabis from Schedule 4 drug, which is equal to Schedule 1 in our system, to the lowest schedule, which is Schedule 1 internationally, and would be 4 or 5 in ours. And they descheduled CBD completely. So the occurrence of those two things, and finally having a president that directed the Health and Human Services Administration and the DEA to consider rescheduling, they had to do it, and they've done it. I mean, they've not done it, but we've already passed the window of comment, and there'll probably be additional hearings, but hopefully sometime next year, it'll be Schedule 3. And the immediate effect that has automatically is it will probably reduce the price of your cannabis products, because owners and operators will likely save anywhere from 25 to 30% on the very confiscatory tax ramifications of Schedule 1 cannabis, where you can't, operators can't deduct their business expenses. So once it goes to Schedule 3, 280E goes away. That's the Internal Revenue Code section that considers cannabis drug trafficking, quote unquote, drug trafficking. And so once that, automatically, that only applies to drugs that are in Schedule 1 or 2. So when it goes to 3, that goes away. And obviously, it will lower the penalties, even for those states that still have criminal penalties. It should lower the penalties for people arrested for possession or use or, simple crimes like that.
Mhm.
So all in all, I think Schedule 3 is a win for us.
The two aren't really connected. I mean, there's the review that's been ongoing for Schedule 3, and there's, I guess, now the attempt to see if we're going to also do what I would have thought was a parallel review of descheduling entirely, but it just seems to be, unless it's just confusion in my head, which that happens a lot. One really wouldn't affect the other. And I'm thinking it should be a gimme that Schedule 3 will happen sooner if these were parallel but independent reviews. Because it's like way less of a jump, and it's already jumping over Schedule 2. But the idea of jumping over every schedule there is right out, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
But I am just naturally cannot shake the worry, the feeling that the DEA could say, it's a good point. Descheduling is very good arguments made for that. So what we're going to do is put a hold on Schedule 3 while we review descheduling so that we can get it right, because we want to get this, all the bullshit that they would say, to have a reason to drag it out. And what happens when there's no time limit on the review. There's an accepted time, which they're already over that for Schedule 3. Whatever normally, as I'm hearing, it takes routinely 6 months for something like this is like probably 9 months on now. And I don't know. I just don't want to see anything delay or sidetrack that, because not being in Schedule 1 does affect a lot,
Well, I mean,
and we don't, Medicaid doesn't want to cover it because that's subsidized federally, and it's a Schedule 1 drug. Well, if it's going to be Schedule 3, there's just other things, and I can't help but feeling that also changes some banking concerns, some interstate transportation concerns.
all these are valid points,
Yeah.
Jim, but it's sort of like, don't reject the good because the perfect isn't.
No. Yeah. Oh yeah.
There's a clear blue line here, and I don't like to bring politics into everything, but it's a clear blue line.
Oh, I'm all for,
when Democrats control,
Yeah.
we have a chance to get to descheduling.
Yeah.
Under a red state, we aren't going to get there. They won't vote. They did nothing in this Congress to advance descheduling like we did twice under Democratic control of Congress. And it just ain't going to happen. And, they'll vote for it when Democrats bring it up, but they won't bring it up independently. And so by putting in Schedule 3, that may even delay descheduling to a later time, just because they'll be satisfied that some progress has been made. That's the way they
Well,
think. I think. But
I,
at
I,
least
I
at
agree.
least when you're in the Republic of California, it's about as free as it gets. That's the one thing. When I wake up in the mornings, I say, there's freedom. I mean, weed has been free for a long time in California, not
Yeah.
just by laws and regulations, but by the acceptance of the population culturally
Yes.
to cannabis. So,
Yeah.
That's what it is up here.
Yeah.
It's like that here because it's like that up here. Well, I'm right outside in
Yeah.
New York City, so
yeah. And so
it's
culturally, it's
yeah,
just,
it just doesn't matter.
yeah, nobody
But
really thinks
but
of
like when everybody looks at Schedule 3, and anytime I get into this discussion with anyone, because of course I would love to see it descheduled, but Schedule 3, it's not like a terrible schedule to have. Yeah, you need a script, but antibiotics are Schedule 3. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like a mix and match grocery list of schedules.
Yeah. So,
Where you have Xanax and what have you, drugs that are very harmful. You could die through with the withdrawals.
yeah.
And they're Schedule 4 or 5.
Well, they moved it to 3 because they're synthetics. They're Marinol and Dronabinol. They're in
Right,
Schedule
right.
3. But right here, I gave this to some of the people I work with, but it's a little handy dandy sheet that basically describes post Schedule 3. There's exceptions in the legislation that will allow all of our state licensed facilities to continue to operate just as they always have. And that's because there's basically a specific exemption that allows a state authorized or state licensed facility to be able to legally handle and process and sell, cannabis.
Jim, Lefty, aren't they? Didn't we see something like that for here? For in the if we go to rescheduling, didn't we see that? Aren't we? I thought we were gonna have. I could be wrong. I could have been reading somebody else's, but I thought that Jersey had something similar to run with
For the scheduling of
for Schedule
cannabis.
3. Yeah,
No, that's
that
the
it would stay.
That's
It
the
would still
department.
stay. It would still stay. The dispensaries wouldn't lose out.
Yeah.
Because that was the whole big fight, really.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Cannabis would be descheduled. Marijuana would not be rescheduled. They make a distinction between marijuana and cannabis.
they're really making it confusing with that too.
Oh my God. Say it ain't so. Say it ain't so.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the Department of Consumer Affairs is in charge of that in New Jersey, and CMMJ, I think, twice has gone through the act of petitioning them the proper way, and it just gets summarily dismissed because it's federally Schedule 1, and they're just going to take their cue. But if it goes Schedule 3, it's going to be really a lot of fun to make the case again with Consumer Affairs, and really make them look as detached as they are.
It's going to be interesting if it goes to Schedule 3, what goes on within the walls of the emergency departments.
Yeah.
I worked 40 years in emergency departments. They're a mess, especially.
Well, just another thing though, being is Schedule 3, by definition, every drug in Schedule 2 is more dangerous than every drug in Schedule 3. And with that being the case, especially here in New Jersey, where we use opiate, what's it called? Something, just opiate use disorder or something.
Yeah.
Addiction.
Yeah.
That's an indication to get into the program to use cannabis.
Well, that's cannabis use disorder.
Yeah. Well, no, but to use a cannabis, I have opiate abuse disorder,
Yeah.
And that's an indication that you can now, in New Jersey, be a medical cannabis patient and get that. But also because it's pretty easy to make the case that it acts in synergy with opiates, so that, the common way, I mean, not necessarily accurate, but I love doing it, especially with the hand descriptions. If you needed 5 units of an opiate to get rid of pain without cannabis, likewise, you needed 5 units of cannabis to get rid of pain without opiates, you would need no more than 2 units of each acting in synergy. So the fingers don't add up all of a sudden. It's like it should be a 10. But that being the case, if a person has never been prescribed opiates and something happens where it is a good course of action, for any physician would recognize that, as tight as things are, and no matter what, you're only going to get 5 days of prescription when you leave the hospital and all that. But I can make quite the case for you should always offer them cannabis with their first ever in their life use of opiates, because in the beginning, before they've ever had a chance to get used to them, they're going to have less opiate use, less chance of addiction.
Right.
So it's sort of like, no matter what you feel about it, if you're just freaked out about drug addiction in New Jersey, reach New Jersey, everything, but except this. I'm not saying it'll get any traction, but it's just going to be fun making the argument.
Well, there's education is a big component, because basically, the opiate crisis, so to speak, was thrust upon us by big pharma, medical industrial complex. I mean, they used to say, "Oh man, it's the drug dealer in the street." No, it's the drug dealer on Wall Street. That's it.
Yeah, it's the Sackler family.
But I like to say that my definition of cannabis use disorder, because I think that whenever we talk about those issues, we forget about the 800-pound gorilla, which is opiates,
Uh-huh.
But I say cannabis use disorder is because I just ran out of cannabis.
Yeah. But but what does that do? When okay, so say we go to Schedule 3, okay, and so now all of a sudden, some kid gets popped because he's underage, right? And so he says to his probation officer says to him, "Well, do you have cannabis use disorder?" And he says, "Yes," because that'll get him into a program rather than, juvie or what have you, like they do with opioids up here. They take you right to the what's it called? Newbridge Hospital. The former Bergen Pines. Anyway, so everybody goes there instead of going to jail. Okay.
Yeah, well, so that's
they go there.
Thing. Yeah.
They go there, and then they get to go to their shrink and say, "Well, I have a cannabis use disorder, so I can apply for disability." Right?
Yeah.
So I'm jumping over into different age groups.
Yeah. But I wasn't sure what direction you're going, but there's another permutation of that, because our biggest friends in the medical community tend to be anesthesiologists.
Yes, I know.
Our biggest enemies tend to be the psychiatrists, psychologists, and counselors, because they created this system of drug courts.
Yep.
And so anybody and everybody, is diverted, and they have to undergo the counseling.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big cash cow for that.
Big money.
Yeah, big money that they're going to lose out on.
Yep. And most of them they don't take insurance, So there's that piece too.
And you have to do it or to avoid jail, which is. But I totally agree with all these subjects. And again, it would be better if we had it descheduled.
Yeah.
And with a blue House and a blue Senate and a blue, president, that could happen. It ain't happening in any other dynamic, and it's not going to happen.
We just have to keep yelling, "Say it to my face."
Yeah, say it to my face. Right.
Miriam on Facebook says, "It affects my business. She's not allowed to advertise because she's a massage therapist and she uses CBD in her business. She can't wait till it's fully legalized because even for CBD, they block her on Google, Facebook, Venmo, and Instagram. She's nationally, she's right.
I would file a complaint about
She
that.
says she should get a cannabis lawyer. She should, because she only uses topical CBD. She's not selling anything, but she uses it for her massage therapy. So should she seek a cannabis lawyer? She's asking.
Tell her just come up here. I'll defend her. Are you kidding me? Really? They do that all over the place here.
Yeah, no, it's
CBD
kind of
is-
like one of those things where, you know, your the cost of trying to challenge those things at this point in time against a Goliath like a Facebook or a Instagram or a, you know, you name it, it is just so incredibly there's no incentive to do it that way. But you know, I would try to find creative ways to use cannabinoids or plant medicine or, you know, whatever you can. But it's crazy. CBD is descheduled now internationally.
Mhm.
It's a Schedule 5 drug now in our scheme here, the Controlled Substances Act. And, you know, it's sold in every smoke shop in California, as far as I know. And California has no interest in trying to enforce it. And the DEA would never have any incentive to really enforce it because it's impossible, you know. But the whole advertising thing is, yeah, I mean, that's just crazy that, you know, we're still having to deal with that. And it's these big, you know, social media outlets that now control, and their decision is final.
Yeah,
Use
because
LinkedIn.
they're
LinkedIn's
private, right?
You know.
yeah, LinkedIn is cannabis friendly. Use LinkedIn. Just saying.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. They're pretty friendly.
This is not says it helped me kick my opiate use. I feel much better now and use cannabis to help with my pain nowadays. 2 years off opiates, June 21st.
Yeah, good for him.
That's
or her.
awesome.
Awesome, man. Wow.
And Nurse Heather, when she got started, my better 2/3 is cannabis Nurse Heather. And she was the first nurse who was the medical director for a cannabis dispensary and producer in New Mexico, the first ever. And she would talk about some of her in-home patients that she worked with, and they would have lots of opiates and other pills. And within 6 to 9 to 12 months, she'd have them completely off all those other medicines. And the only thing they would be using would be cannabis, which is such a broad spectrum. I mean, they're literally, as I've done all the research, and I spent literally my entire professional career researching cannabis, there's very, very few conditions that don't respond well to cannabis.
She took out a website and they wouldn't let her advertise on the website either.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And we have a magazine that's produced weekly here called The Reader, and half of The Reader is advertisements for all cannabis products, whether it's THC or CBD or anything else.
Well, that's good business then. When it
If-
becomes good
If their
business,
advertising, if cannabis advertising dried up for them, it would become basically it would be a one page magazine.
well, they got that right then.
Yeah.
It's,
Ken, I got a fun question for you.
Yes,
Here
sir.
we go. Oh, here we go.
First time you ever got stoned, you ever smoked weed. Is there a story behind the first time you smoked weed, and how old were you?
Probably 12 or 13.
Same.
Yeah, and I think we smoked and drank some really nasty bourbon at a farm on the outskirts of Tucson, and we kind of like passed out after all of that next to a pig sty. You know, there were big. All I remember is I woke up and there were these huge pigs with huge pig balls that were. I'm like, oh my god, I didn't realize.
Your little wound.
Yeah. And, I was in a rural part of Tucson, Arizona.
Were you? Must have been horrified. Oh my God, you're
Place
12.
with a,
Like,
place
what
with
am
a
I doing
pig
here?
sty. Wow.
I'll never do that again.
Never.
Yeah.
What's your favorite munchie food?
You know,
Lefty
I
asks
don't.
everybody
I
that.
don't do edibles much anymore. I've got lots of stories with having gone. I mean, if it's munchies,
Yeah.
that was the name I
Yeah,
was going to
munchies.
do for my infused peanut M&Ms. That I never got around to making those.
Mm.
But I was going to sell a little package of infused M&Ms with a big package of just regular M&Ms and call it the munchies. So you could get
That would have been cute.
a couple of infused M&Ms, and then you have something else to rely on.
Yeah.
And you have to keep
That
going.
would,
But
that would have been cool.
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
a good idea because often the infused product is so good, you really kind of want another, and it's not like you're going to forget. But first time I had candy, oh man, I mean, I just had like a way long, but I mean, I had a good reaction, you know.
So
and a lot of
So
food.
Nurse Heather created all the edibles for the state of Arizona,
Yeah,
and
they
we
were
had
good.
that market solely to ourselves for
They were
almost
yummy.
a year. And so any dispensary that opened, the only product they could carry was ours. And so we went statewide with these products, but she made a lot of great tasty munchies and people loved them. And we go back there because we sold out that business, and we're still going back this last year for a reunion, and we go to one of the dispensaries there, and they still have her products on the shelf.
Nice.
So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, that is.
Grab some patches.
And we make some patches, some transdermal patches.
Grab some.
Yeah.
You know, when I don't have any infused products, you know, I'll have oatmeal raisin cookies that aren't infused and take a fingerful of the balm, and it's pretty much the same effect.
You know, back in the day, I would make the brownies for our dispensary with a, and so you know, I mean, back in the day is actually really good. Back in the day, for all of your friends or listeners who are on here, because there was a time back in the day where we had what's called the collectives in California, and they were just little mom and pop shops. They didn't have anything fancy, you know, and yet you could go in there and get just about anything you needed and be out within a matter of minutes without all the regulations that had been layered on and layered on and layered on, and without the expense, you know. And it was so much, it was fun. We really enjoyed it. It was a great way to get the medicine out to people. It was really super cheap. And now it's just so expensive that, you know, a lot of these products are beyond people's prices. But the good news here is we can grow plants. I don't know if New Jersey allows you to grow your own or not, but that would be the one thing I would definitely advocate for, because we would teach my dispensary that I owned in Tucson. I would teach people how to grow, and we'd send people out to help them set up their grows. And they grow and they try to do it, and they get tired of it. And then they come back and be even more loyal customers to us because we help them at least to try to do it. And then some others would learn to grow themselves, and they'd have really all they need, you know. And that's the beauty of cannabis. You can grow the plant.
We will get home grow for patients. It's really an impossible story and situation, but suffice to say, it's been a long fight and a very concerted fight for almost 4 years now. But eventually, when that happens, we only have like 80,000 patients, and we got to always tell people, out of those 80,000, I would be surprised if 10,000 bothered to file to grow their own. And you just don't throw seeds down and grow, so many would be expected to fail. However, what I notice is there's a lot of people who take pride in their growing and would you know be qualified to help a patient, you know. So you could put people sort of together for patients that don't, but those that are going to be growing indoors, then it becomes a matter of a good way to sell your grow systems and stuff. If you have somebody qualified not only to set it up, but to make sure that they know what to do, and do the FaceTime and look at my lead, whatever, just make sure they know how to do that sort of stuff.
Right.
And it'd be the biggest thing to help in New Jersey and for any other state.
Right. When I wrote the bill for the U.S. Virgin Islands, my original draft allowed patients to grow 16 plants.
Lefty, put that on his bio. That was missing.
we allowed patients would be able to grow up to 16 plants, and I provided a method where each person who had the right to grow at home could also sell up to 4 pounds of what they grew into the system.
Wow.
And that would probably at that time would have generated, say, $12,000, $15,000 per family. And they're super poor there. I mean, they had a big industrial business that closed, and they lost 10,000 jobs. And so these people were really struggling. But I was going to allow them to sell that back into the system. And then we would be able to test every plant basically that's grown on the island, you know. So we'd know everything that was out there. They ended up not including that in their final bill, but
No, well,
I tried.
You tried, yeah.
got to know where the edge is. There it
Yeah.
was. Hey, no harm, no foul. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, you don't
Give
know.
it a try in New Jersey. See if you can get, I mean, if people could grow their own and then sell some of it into the regulated system, make a little money on the side. I mean, everybody's,
See,
lifts all ships.
the thing is, anybody making a little money on the side, the state wants a slice of the pie. You know, this is New Jersey. This is the way it's going to work. You know, but in a best case scenario, patients would end up growing more than they need, and they could hook up with other patients that can't grow and work it out between themselves.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
in New Jersey, adults have the right to give another adult up to an ounce by state law. So, it's basically just say you're giving it to the other person and work it out. I mean, that would take care of itself maybe, but it just seems like there's such simple answers to such major problems that others keep putting up, and all this is well known to be beyond the point of no return. I don't know why anybody with a healthcare issue being dealt with would refuse to let go of the rope. They're being pulled towards the mud pit in this tug of war. At some point they got to get smart and just let go of the rope. We fall on our ass and win. I mean, it's I almost can't believe a lot of the dissent is a lot more behind the scenes now. There is a lot fewer people out really articulating why this is a very bad idea. But
yeah, they're really not saying too much about anything. Kenny, last year I moved back to Jersey. I was living in New York for 20 years. You know that, right?
Yeah.
So New York they just recently changed it too. They allowed each patient or caregiver could grow
Right.
7 plants. Okay. 7 people could live in the house that were patients. So that would be 49 plants. Okay. So that's a relatively decent growth. So they just recently, like within, I would say the past, I'm going to give it a little stretch of 6 months, but they changed it. They backed it down. So to, I think six plants. I mean, they took away a plant from everybody, but nobody in New York ever paid attention to anything. So then I moved back here, right? Not paying attention to what's going on here because I was busy up there. And so I moved my plants here and put them on the balcony. And then one of you told me, I think, right? Lefty maybe told me, no home grow here. All of a sudden, I start hearing it. It was like, yeah, you guys told me. I was like, oh, I guess I got to move these.
Well, when Arizona was the 12th state and they had home grow with their original medical cannabis law, and I don't know who was 13th, but we were 14th.
Okay.
We went the other way. We were the first state that took the Donner Pass. We just went the wrong way. Let's try this. And now, 15 years later, as hard as we try, it's hard. It's sort of like, no, we don't have to prove anything. You have to validate what you saved us from for 15 years. All the other states that did this, what's going on there that you saved us from? And if you can't tell us, let's have home grow for patients. I mean, while that would be simple in the argument stage, and the long and short of it is a very short story, there's been an adequate enough medical cannabis home grow bill ready to have its first informational hearing for 3.5 years, but not allowed by a Senate president. So that's beginning to end why we don't have it. But I think that's about to change. Our 2-year election cycle is counter to the federal ones. We're off here, us in Virginia. Right. So like this is actually the first half. And the idea that the bill's been heard even from a hearing makes it almost like a censorship issue for me. But our work is almost done at the moment it gets its first hearing, because we're pretty realistic here. We have a decent enough cannabis program. We have one of the better medical cannabis programs for patients where they can medicate, because it's basically the same as where you can smoke a cigarette. If you're allowed to smoke a cigarette, you're pretty well allowed to smoke or use your medicine there. And I'm finding that's very rare, that you can do that. And
you can't smoke cannabis anywhere in California.
Yeah, really. How far down the list of what California is great at is that for us to go, we got you there, man. We can smoke at a bus stop.
We've got Encinitas up the road here a little ways. I'm in La Jolla, and the UCS Center for Cannabis Research is just down the hill and up the hill. And then a little bit north of that by the Del Mar racetrack, if you're a thoroughbred horse racing fan, just north of that, a city announced that they're going to pass an ordinance now that that limits tenants in apartments and condos from smoking.
They just did that here.
Yeah. So
this is
that's the trend.
So they all go in, or a closed up garage and smoke in there. They can go on their balconies, but they don't.
Yeah. The first time I was in California, with 2006, I believe, in San Francisco, and then we took a ride about 2 hours north into us. We're just really getting to know things. But what got me was I had a rental car, and when in California we had to pull over, and everybody would get out of the car and smoke, and cars would be going by. And up until a week before that, everybody would hide in their car and smoke to try to not be noticed. Why? And I found that extremely just strange. And the freedom feeling you're talking about, I feel that. And it felt free in California. I also felt like I blended in instantly. We were in San Francisco, and it's sort of like nobody noticed me. It was instantly, I would fare well in that environment. I don't know if I would be able to exist in that environment because of, other things. But I was very impressed, So I'm a little bit jealous, But I really, I think that Ryan's law is something that's really good for us in New Jersey to be well versed on, because it's exactly what we need here, and there is zero reasons why it can't happen. Because the sky is not falling in California with Ryan's law. It's saving lives and adding some sort of meaning to the end of lives too, with not that.
And Sue's part of that same group with my wife for the Cannabis Nurses Network. Mm-hmm. And so she's been a great advocate for Ryan's law too. And we're getting that rolled out. I mean, we got Hawaii. I've testified in Nevada. Arizona's going to come along, and so we're kind of looking at that pocket of states. And then I think New Jersey's in the mix somewhere. And it's just weird how much time it takes to roll these things out, get a legislator on board to introduce the bill, to get to a hearing and be able to, with your 1-minute presentation, I mean, anymore, I immediately go to just answering what I know the hospital association is going to say, because they have the same crap that they put out there. We can't get our Medicare reimbursements. I hand them the email that I have from the 9th district of Medicare that says we don't care about it. We're not going to withhold anybody's payments. And even at that point, the legislators are still listening to the hospital association. So, they just they're big and they're tough and they're merciless, and it's the almighty dollar.
Merciless. That's funny though. I mean,
Yeah.
it's an accurate description,
Oh,
but to a hospital,
And
No,
that's
it's-
just the way it is. I mean,
It's one of the stranger things also that, I mean, parallel to California is the doctor patient privilege of, if a doctor says this is good for his patient, the patient wants it, it's nobody else's business, that's where you start. So the same guy, senator, that is not allowed to have his bill heard in the Senate Health Committee didn't let that stop him from writing another bill behind that, that would be this bill that would allow a doctor to recommend cannabis for any indication. It's between him and his patient. So to have a bill to do that here, and it's behind a bill that's being blocked, I'm hoping it can jump over it somehow.
Yeah.
I mean, but the idea that there's things like that happening, and people are just kind of easy to let it slide and slow to really have any will to stop it.
Yeah.
Actually, that's the advice right now to us by people. Legislators. No will.
I got a call from the staff member to the chairman of the Assembly Health Committee the first time around on Ryan's Law. And he said, hey, we're not going to get the votes because the hospital association is telling us they're going to lose all their Medicare reimbursements, Medi-Cal reimbursements. What can we do? And so that night I wrote out a specific exception that if they're even threatened with the loss of their reimbursements because of Ryan's Law, that the hospital could immediately suspend that law. In other words, I wrote a safe harbor for them specifically.
Really?
That's pretty
And so
cool.
it passed, went to the Assembly Health Committee, and they actually passed it 14-0. I can't remember the committee's composition. And then eventually the Assembly passed it unanimously. And this was after we'd gone through all of that. And yet, like I said, it'll be the same in New Jersey, just like it is in the other, 48 states, is that, the hospital association comes in,
Mm-hmm.
they got that special key that goes to the governor's door, they open that door and they say, don't do it. And that's what happened the first time around. Second time around, Gavin's a great governor. I mean, he's done so many great things, I think, for the state, and he's been a very passionate advocate for cannabis all the way through. But this one instance, he vetoed it. The next time he got it, he redeemed himself and signed it. So
Well,
can't complain.
Whoever has the key to the governor's door in New Jersey eventually better have a key to the Senate president's door too.
Well, that former governor, you don't show up with a few turkeys and steaks and food. He was quite a large guy.
Oh,
He's
Chris-
the one that
Chris
set back
Christie.
New Jersey, didn't he?
Yeah.
I forget his name now, but
Chris Christie.
he was the had no interest in cannabis whatsoever. To hate on it.
We were so joined at the hip. He had to walk by us at the time a weekly protest podcast at the State House. I mean, right at the steps. Not somewhere. I mean, right there. But you may or may not have heard of his problem with traffic cones. There was a problem at the George Washington Bridge, New Jersey side, getting into New York and Fort Lee, where lanes going through the toll booth to get onto the bridge were cut down to like 1 lane instead of 3, I believe it was, which created gridlock in Fort Lee. Ambulances couldn't get where they had to go. And the reason was ultimately the mayor of Fort Lee would not support Chris Christie at the beginning of his second term. He was getting mayor's endorsements from Democrats, however he could. But it really wasn't him that did that. But, and I believe unbeknownst to him, I mean, somebody thought this would be a good way to score some points, but with an investigation and all that, it was a big, huge thing to where he's like, what do people think I'm out there in overall setting up cones? He was like taking all this heat. So we started putting up cones entry into the State House, 40 of them. And they were a little over 3 feet apart, ADA approved to get wheelchair. It wasn't holding people from walking through them. It was a prop, and we have a permitted demonstration. We're allowed. To his credit, Chris Christie never went in the back door. There's a back door in there that other governors would have used under that.
Yeah,
But
he would go in the front door.
he went in the front door and Lefty somewhere between like 14 and 20 times over the next 2 years through them cones. And the first time he tried to ignore us and walk by, we had a veteran, Leo Bridgewater, a guy kind of new to the advocacy scene, and he was at the table, and there's the governor, and I believe Lefty said, "We have a veteran here who would like to say something," and he blew on by, and then there's some debate exactly where the governor was when Lefty chastised him, whether he was just inside the door, because we're right there, or just outside the door. But Lefty's words of wisdom that still ring out in people's minds later is, did you say don't act like a pussy, Lefty? What exactly did you say?
Don't be one.
Don't be a pussy. Yeah, that's right. You didn't call him a pussy. You just said don't be a pussy. And
Lefty says things nicely too.
Yeah, it wasn't with anger, and it didn't sound like it wasn't used.
Wasn't mean.
Yeah. But then he didn't come over and talk, but he did acknowledge us. At one point, he did have the head of the program call me up because we wanted to find out how to be able to get this care to people in institutions, especially hospice. And this is going like back now that, midway through his thing. So for all that, and then he kind of got screwed over the last podcast. Everybody thought he'd be in the Trump administration, and then
they blew him right out.
And it didn't. But anyway, it was that was the weekly podcast, and for 8 months a year for the first 3 years, it was a weekly.
That was fully baked radio, right?
What's that? Yeah,
fully baked. Yeah,
that was us. That was us. Steve Across.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. Well, yeah, fully baked, or yeah.
That
was Phil.
I have pictures from that one. That kind of predated our podcast.
We collaborated with Fully Baked, but we were always the ignorance is no excuse.
We went to their Robbinsville or wherever it was studio a couple of times, and Weed Man would be there and
with his megaphone. He would say at night, he'd yell down the street to the governor, "Hi, Governor Christie." He'd yell back, "Hi, Ed."
Yeah. Well, he would
that front door.
He'd go to the New Jersey radio station. What's our radio station? 101.5 on the radio, whatever it's called. But he would go park in the weed mobile there, and Governor would then go by, and he seemed to be great friends with the Weed Man,
Mm-hmm.
And Lefty did just get to see Governor Christie briefly because a friend won 2 tickets to see a Springsteen concert in Meadowlands Stadium, Giant Stadium, where they play football. And that the box, the indoor thing where you can have a whole party and look out and all. But at the end, it turns out that he saw the guy blocking the bill, the Senate president, walk by, and went and followed him. And he walked into Chris Christie's thing because he's a huge Springsteen fan. Just like, was it right next door to yours, Lefty, or the next one? Just anyway, they walked on in and had a quick hello. But
Yeah, I mean, we see all the time. I mean, on one day you got Republicans and Trump saying that Kamala was too easy on crime, and then the next day they say she was too tough on crime.
Prosecuted.
It's hard to fathom because which way do you want it? She was just as much pro cannabis as Gavin was. She was Attorney General. She helped to implement the Attorney General guidelines that we needed. When she was Attorney General, she helped implement the medical part of our statewide program, and Trump, on the other hand, we ran into him. I put on the first cannabis conference in Texas, of all places. And that's a scary thing. And so we were in the Fort Worth part, which is very conservative.
Very place.
So we put it on in Fort Worth, and this was in the summer of 2016, before the election. And Trump had been putting on one of his rallies at the same facility. And they needed a little bit more time because they hadn't finished yet. And we'd already rented that space. It was supposed to be ours to set up our display. And he had come over and asked us if they could possibly use the space for a little bit longer. And it seemed pretty nice at that point in time because he needed something, I guess. And then he proceeded to say how much in favor of medical cannabis he was. Of course, he gets elected. And one of the first things he does is he immediately gets rid of the Ogden memo and the Cole memo. And those were the two Justice Department memos that all we had at the time to protect patients from abusive federal prosecution. And of course, he's not in the White House for more than a few months, and he immediately gets rid of both of those. And it wasn't until, Joe won that we actually restored that and got again, the policy of DOJ not to enforce these marijuana laws against, basically private citizens, patients, and small time operators, as long as we weren't violating, other drug laws. So, but, the case that we have now is that we need a blue president, a blue Congress, and that's the only progress we're really going to make in the next 4 years, so.
George Bush, W., ran in his first term, running for a second term. Before the election, he was campaigning saying, I think that states should have the right to choose how to decide that decision for themselves. He mangled the words in such W fashion. It was kind of cute, but then he said that, and then he flip-flopped in his first term. And maybe it was he said that before his first term. And, it's just like, okay, that's what's going to happen. I mean, Donald Trump is like, he's the king of it. It's like he has a verbal drone attack of 1,000 lies, and you can swat down 987 of them and 13 get through. And next thing you know, he has a bigger fan base. I mean, it's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. But I felt enough about the George Bush thing. I got arrested when he came to New Jersey 4 weeks before the election, saying he flip-flopped on medical marijuana in 1999. Yes, 2000. No, and I know because he landed by helicopter, and there was 1,100 people that could fit into this center where it was, but it was kind of rural, so a helicopter could land right there. And then there was another 2,500 people that couldn't get in, of which I was amongst them. And there's the big blue bus of who was it? Al Gore supporters. Was that Al Gore? I start getting mixed up. Anyway, the sign I had was large enough that you could absolutely see it with the helicopter flying in. So I felt wonderful about that. It's just the police had to. And I had very different points of view whether I could take my wheelchair out of the parking lot across the street to walk the sidewalk, and
Yeah.
they decided I couldn't, and I decided I could, and then they arrested me, but I couldn't go through a whole trial that I certainly would have won because I was actually temporarily moving to Florida to where I had a job for the winter. And, so I had to take a $400 fine and feel horrible about it. But anyway, it was just fun to sort of do that. But when I read a headline that says Trump says, those two words together, just Trump says, why would I want to read further?
Yeah, right.
Said?
Everything goes out of his mouth. We just had Willie Nelson in town, so we had Willie Nelson and John Cougar Mellencamp.
Wow,
that's right. You went to the show, right?
I think he called it the Outlaw Show, and it was
that's what Heather told me.
And it was a great show. And but I always use that line from Willie that the only way you can die from marijuana is if a bale of it falls on your head. And they had a Willie's Reserve little stand. No free samples. We haven't gotten to that point yet, but he's still kicking.
How old is he now?
And we had Bob Dylan also. Bob from
90.
So
Willie Nelson's 90. Bob Dylan's not that far behind him.
Shouldn't be.
Yeah. He's both of these guys. I mean,
he's older than us.
Bob Dylan's 82.
Okay.
Willie's like what, 91?
It could be 90 or 91. Yeah. He just had a birthday not that long ago.
Yeah, right. They had that birthday party for him.
Yeah, so we had this thing called Kaboo, and it was for about 5 years. It was in the mid-September, and it was a big 3-day music festival right here in Del Mar. And it was wonderful. And then it ran into problems, and then there was COVID. And so basically they haven't had another one since. But the last one we basically had Tom Petty doing the final feature show.
Oh.
And then we saw it. And then 10 days later or less, he died in LA. You know. And then we went to see Willie, came into town like 2 months later, and he was doing a show at one of the Native American casinos. And he literally almost died on stage. I mean, he almost collapsed that he had to say, I'm sorry, I can't perform anymore. And that's the last we saw of him. We thought, oh my God. Or Heather and I thought,
probably dehydrated.
Not only killed Tom Petty, but we just killed Willie Nelson too.
No.
Yeah.
But
I remember
he was still okay. He was still okay. And so after they essentially canceled the concert, the interesting thing was I get a notice in the mail about 2 months later saying they're refunding what we paid on account of a hurricane.
Oh, okay.
Claiming that a hurricane had occurred, which I just assumed that was like shorthand in the insurance world for it got canceled and insurance is going to pay it off.
Hurricane Willie.
Okay.
Just an aside. I know.
Wait, not much.
Do you have any more questions up there? Come on. You must have a couple more.
You know, I probably had questions earlier, but I'm not medicating. I'm enjoying my night, and I do have less pain on my feet. So, one's a byproduct of the other. Guess which?
Lefty has something. Come on.
One last question. If you have a friend of yours who's down on his luck, who's depressed or upset, do you have something that a quote or something that you have kept through your life that you use to cheer somebody up, or some advice that you would give to just cheer somebody up, make them feel better?
Maybe not so much that, but there's just a memory that I have. We used to go do whitewater rafting in the mountains just outside of Bakersfield called the Kern River. And it's a lot of fun, and it's good team building, and it's a lot of fun. But as you're driving up there, you go from a very flat area up this mountain to get on the other side to where the river is. But at the very bottom of the mountain, before you start driving up these windy single lane road each way, there's actually a yellow caution sign. And the caution sign doesn't have any words on it, but it depicts sort of a cliff like you're going to be driving up. And then over the side of the cliff, there's an upside down cow falling with a bunch of debris, so it's caution, watch for falling cows. I've always felt like, and especially in the cannabis space too, I've always felt like, what are you going to do? I mean, if the cow is falling and you're on the road below, you're either going to miss the cow or the cow's going to hit you. I mean, it just doesn't matter. And so it was like, it just doesn't matter.
It's
Stop
great.
living your life in fear of things that probably just aren't going to happen. And if they do, you have no control on the outcome. So that would be,
great.
that
That's
would
good.
be
I
my,
like
I
that.
love that one, man. That's awesome. Wow.
That's the third of 3
watch
questions.
for falling cows.
Well, Ken, I think that I have to thank you for spending time with us tonight. I really I learned a lot. I don't know about you guys. I learned a lot.
Oh yeah.
I enjoyed it. Y'all are fabulous, wonderful. Keep up what you're doing. We got Sue back there, our nurse Sue, who's been a hero in this space and helping and advocating for things all throughout the country. And so you're all in good hands with the team that you have, and
Yeah.
enjoy things. I hope things go well for you in New Jersey, and be safe.
Thank
Thanks,
you. That's for
Kenny.
sure. Do you have a
And we'll
website?
see you in September.
See you in
Yeah.
December.
You got a website or
September,
something you
not
want to?
December. I'm coming in
I
September.
don't. Yeah, I'm not big. The Cannabis Nurse Network is the best way to. I'd encourage anyone to go there, and there's a lot of great information. Sign up, become a member. My business I call Genesis International. I'm basically a private attorney and consultant. I do mergers, acquisitions, business operations of all different types, and I've been doing that for many, many, many years. I try to help people who are interested in getting a start in the industry and the business here to be able to do so at affordable prices. So that's kind of been my thing.
Well, Sue has some really quality guests on the show, and you're right up there.
Well, thanks, Jim.
Yeah.
Appreciate you and
It's
Sue.
what I really like is that when we have our version of Ryan's Law, something to that effect, when it's getting any traction at all, and I'm not the one that's gonna, but I'll smell I'll smell it happen, and that's when it'd be nice to name drop you and your credentials, and especially if there's a hearing or somewhere that's taking information, to more or less be able to sort of quote you, and let them know that you're our guy we go to for information. I don't know however
Yeah.
we do that,
And Jim, we have a Ryan's Law website, and so it's easy to just Google and find it. And we just got that going a few months ago. Primarily me and Nurse Heather and Jim, our dear friend. And you can get information on that. And then we're here to help. If you guys have a core of people that are really enthusiastic about Ryan's Law for New Jersey,
we are.
then the foundation that we set up has resources, and we move along basically monthly meetings, and we work with the legislators, and we sort of provide assistance to you to have that organically come from New Jersey. So yeah, it's a great thing, and
Well,
I mean,
if anybody ever gets in touch with you from New Jersey and said one of your good best friends, Jim Miller, was telling me, don't give up the jig there, and say, because Jim Miller is a pretty common name. I mean, they're both in the top. They're both in the top 6 of most common in this country. Our
county attorney, who was a fraternity brother of mine, he was the county attorney for 29 years, Jim Miller.
Yeah. Well.
And then one of the young fraternity brothers that I helped establish at San Diego State, he's a sports agent. So there are a lot of Jim Millers, but they
yeah. I'm a mixed martial artist. I see my name appearing in like as entertainment places. Oh, Jim Miller appearing. Like get in and go, here I am. Can I have a free drink? Get out. But I'm going to be name dropping you more like, to where, like, Jim has advised me that you're the go-to guy they have for why this is so important, and would like us to use what's going on in California as a model. So that's good.
That's kind of you.
You serve a dual purpose here. One, you're a great guest, and it was very informative. And I always make notes so I can
Okay.
and try to remind myself a couple of things. And plus, if I have something to say, I write it down and try because I forget stuff. But these are mostly stuff I want to know more about. So I got some homework to do here.
Well, you keep up the good fight, and hopefully
Yeah.
we'll see you either out here in California sometime or back there in New Jersey sometime. I've got to bring Nurse Heather out to the East Coast for our next trip.
You do. Yes, you do.
Yeah, well, it would be amazing to cross paths, actual paths, But to me, this Zoom meeting is pretty, it's pretty personal. It's way different than a call and voices and stuff. So
Sure.
as old school as this is going to seem in 10 more years, I'm glad you made it, and we were on our best behavior.
Thanks so much. I
You guys
appreciate
really
all
were.
your
I'm
best
proud of
behavior.
you. I'm proud of you guys, and
Thanks for the
thank
invite.
you so much.
Yeah, well, it worked out well for all of us,
Thanks,
All
Ken.
right.
It's also the one that there's a growing pile of when somebody wants to know what the podcast is about, to have like about 6 or so cherry picked ones, because we can
Yeah.
go off the rails and have a whole lot of fun if it's not too important.
So Jim, Nurse Heather and I did one called Good News with Nurse Heather. So Google it or have your listeners Google it, but it was just a half-hour show.
Really?
And we did about 20, 25 episodes, but it was kind of a kick. So if you have a chance, check that out sometime. It's buried somewhere on the internet. I don't know where exactly, but it's Good News with Nurse Heather.
Yeah, I'll be able to find that. I mean, I'm guessing there's something on YouTube.
That was a real rip. We had fun. We had fun with it.
Somebody always puts up, but I do spend time looking for things like that. So when that makes my list, so I have a little free time, let me go mining here. What do I do? It could be a reaction video to a comedian I like, wherever. Oh, I got to search this out.
Check it out. There's some comic relief in there too.
Good. All right. Thanks for being
All
here.
righty, folks.
Thank you, Ken.
Good seeing you.
You have a great night, brother.
Peace.
I want to thank CMMNJ. I want to thank Canasense, UFCW, Local 152, JacksonStorms.com, Smoking Monkey, Arlo Glass, OprahMachine.com, Mad Hatter Dispensary, where we're at right now. We're in the beautiful Mad Hatter Dispensary, where I'm all alone in a huge building with hundreds and hundreds of pounds of weed. Just kidding.
Somebody rush down there right now.
And he can't smoke in there.
I can't smoke. I got to wait till I go outside. SativaCrust.org. You can donate to us at SativaCrust.org. And Ken, if you're still there, we have a list that we go through of all the people that are our friends and family still waiting for cannabis. And the list begins with Jim's late wife, Cheryl, Sabina, a 15-month-old baby who died from a 25-hour seizure, Diane, Gracie, Cindy Mae, Marie, Jack, Joan, Randy, Polly, Bill, Chad, Jeremy, Colette, Matt, Troy, Russ, Roger, Jay, Ella, Hattie, Jackie, Anthony, Jake, Armando, Felicia, Lynn, Dan, Sean, Joyce, Lori, Frank, Brian, Flo, Carl, Thorne, Frank, Lorraine, Terry, Charlotte, Cher, Jaybird, Michael, Marley, Colette, Brendan, Red, Rico, Lulu, Becky, LaWanda, Chip, Paul, Lisa, Marcus, Gary, and Jeff Oakes. Whew.
Yeah. We always used to say at podcasts, at the end, it's sort of like our duty to make people feel like shit at certain realities. Unlike a lot of other podcasts, they want to end on a good note. We kind of end on it is important. This isn't for your benefit, Ken. It's certainly not for ours, but for people watching and people more or less who will be viewing this. just remind everybody, there's people this doesn't happen in time for. It's a healthcare issue when you're talking about cannabis, but in any way, shape, or form. And, healthcare delayed is healthcare denied.
Yeah. Well, keep up the good fight, my friends.
You too.
Pleasure being with you.
All right. It's a good one. Definitely.
So we'll
Thank you, Ken.
we'll see you all next week.
Thank you all.
See you soon.
And gonna end it with this. They went with songs to the battle. They were young, straight of limb, true of eye, steady and aglow. They were staunch to the end against odds uncounted. They fell with their faces to the foe. They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not worry them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. Good night,
All right.
everybody.
All right. Good one.
That was good.
Lefty was still the whole time.
Yeah, Lefty, what's with that picture?
He's already gone. Are you there, Lefty? Lefty? He's running for the door. I just reminded him he needs a smoke.
Oh, okay.
How long was he just there without having a smoke?
Pretty long.
Yeah, and I wasn't thinking. Well, I'm the only one smoking, and I don't really.
No, you're fine. That's okay.
No, I know. I don't know, but it's like, oh, that's right. He couldn't. Whatever. I bogged out. I'm probably going to be like about Tuesday when I'm through the next section of writing that kind of jumps through. So I thought I wanted to get that done, but I'm not going to hurry it for like a Sunday because tomorrow is band practice day. And when it's not, I have all day Friday and Saturday to get things ready for Sunday. But it's going to be the most fun writing part for me, and it's the first part that puts into effect that I'm right to the part, and I swear to God I remember it. When it was like, okay, then we got to tell people this, and it was when Cheryl got out of the rehab.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was all me, and I found one guy, Robert Lawrence in Florida, who at all advocated for. It was the damnedest thing. I had such a need to do it, but to start with absolutely no guidance whatsoever. I mean, it's pretty easy to encapsulate that, which is the first thing I get to do, and I like, because I start remembering, and I really get, I cut it down from what would be a more expressive, longer versions. I'm actually trying to get short versions, and the better it's been set up, the easier it is. I don't have to include so much new information if it's in a storyline form. Is the walk across the state to get noticed. I mean, that was March of '93, so it would have been like 2 years, 2.5, so something, and like really nothing. I think I might have had a quote. It was so frustrating, and that's a long time.
That's an important story though to tell.
Yeah,
That's an important message. That whole walk across the state.
Hey, Bear, what's up?
Hey guys.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
Lefty, we were missing you. All we could see was a frozen Lefty.
they were continuing on with the side project without you, but you're still here.
Would you go outside?
No,
Lefty, unmute yourself.
yeah. Don't mute you.
There you go.
Well, nobody can hear anything if I'm muted. Oh, that's terrible. All right, you were all just muted for the last 5 minutes. Sorry.
No, we're just getting something else straightened out.
My computer locked up. I had to restart my computer. That's why you didn't see me. It was really.
You weren't moving.
We saw frozen. We saw you frozen.
Yeah. I'm okay now though.
Well, anyway, so that's where it'll be like Tuesday-ish, but it's going to be like the real fun part, and it's sets itself up. But that's where it's going to be direction.
Okay.
That'll start. It'd be like Tuesday-ish, just so you know.
Okay.
All right. There, we just used your time. That was good. All right. Now I'm over and out.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm out of here. I'm going home to eat.
I don't know if if you could hear us. I was guessing your abrupt departure and dropped off was that you were running for the door after I reminded you that you can't smoke where you are with all that and how long it had
Yeah,
been. And
that's where we thought
I'll
you went.
picture you either in your scooter going to the doorway and
Mhm.
It's tough, man.
Oh no,
It's
I forgot it. It's back in there and scooting
And
back.
Ratari was standing out in the parking lot.
Ratari.
All right, everybody.
All right, guys.
Good night.
Bear, I'll see you tomorrow morning. Wake and bake.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, wake and bake in the morning. Just
Oh
like
yeah. Let
today.
me know.
All right, guys.
I'm there.
Later, everyone.
Next
right.
week is Marcy Cooper. She's a
Nice.
hospice nurse in Colorado. She's got all kinds of, she's got an alphabet after her name. Marcy's really cool. She's like one of the longest cannabis nurses I know. I think I met her and Heather around the same time. So it's about 20 years. Okay. So she's good. She's good. You're going to really like her. But she's got a heavy Southern accent. Okay.
Okay, y'all.
All right.
Okay. All right.
All right, later.
Night-night.
Good
All right,
night.
good night.